I am Dorothy Sullivan. I am 70 years old, and I have learned that the most dangerous thing you can do in this world is love the wrong people, especially if they share your last name. I gave my husband and children a global real estate empire valued at over $500 million, a legacy built on 40 years of sweat and risk. And in return, they handed me a one-way ticket to the street and a used sports car for the doctor who declared me insane. They thought they were leaving a helpless, senile old woman to rot behind a dumpster. They thought the war was over because they held the checkbook, but they made a critical miscalculation. They didn't know that the sister I hadn't spoken to in 3 decades had been watching them. They didn't know she left me the keys to the very debt that keeps their lavish lifestyles afloat. By tomorrow morning, the locks on my house will be changed. Their credit cards will be dead plastic, and I will be the one deciding if they sleep in a bed or on the pavement. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The November wind in Chicago didn't just blow a bit. It gnawed at the exposed skin of my knuckles as I worked the bent piece of wire into the padlock of the dumpster behind Rosewood Grill. The metal was freezing, stinging my fingers like a wasp. I wasn't trying to break into a bank. I was trying to break into a garbage bin for a half-eaten loaf of sourdough bread. The smell hit me first, a cloying mix of stale marinara, wet cardboard, and sour wine. It was the perfume of my new life. 2 years ago, I owned the building this restaurant leased. I had signed the original contract at the corner table, drinking a vintage bottle that cost more than the car I currently didn't have. Now I was fighting a raccoon for the crusts. The lock clicked. I felt a surge of pathetic triumph. I reached for the lid, my hands shaking, not just from the cold, but from the caloric deficit that had been my reality for months. Headlights swept across the alley, pinning me against the brick wall like a specimen on a slide. I froze. I dropped the wire. I instinctively curled inward, trying to make my frame disappear into the shadows of the grease trap. It was probably a delivery truck or a patrol car looking to clear out the vagrants. I prepared my speech, the one where I apologized for existing, but the engine didn't sound like a truck. It was a low, powerful purr. I squinted against the glare. A silver Bentley Continental GT pulled to the curb. My Bentley, the one I had custom ordered with the navy blue leather interior because Vincent said black was too depressing. The driver's door opened and a pair of Italian loafers hit the pavement. Vincent stepped out. My husband of 42 years, the man who had sworn to love me in sickness and in health, now wearing the cashmere coat I had bought him in London. He looked distinguished, untouched by the cold that was currently freezing the marrow in my bones. He wasn't alone. The passenger door opened and Vanessa emerged, my daughter, my heir, the CEO of Sullivan Pinnacle Group. She was laughing, adjusting the collar of a coat that cost $3 grand. "It's freezing," Vincent said, wrapping the coat tighter. "Vanessa, hurry up. The reservation is 4-7. "Relax, Dad," Vanessa said, checking her reflection in the car window. "They aren't going to give our table away. We own the place. Well, practically." Then Vincent turned. His eyes scanned the alley, likely looking for a shortcut to the entrance. His gaze landed on the dumpster. It landed on me. I stood there clutching a trash bag, wearing a coat I'd pulled off a dead woman in a shelter 2 weeks ago. I waited for the shock. I waited for the horror. I waited for a flicker of humanity. There was none. His expression didn't change. It was a mask of mild annoyance, the kind you get when you step in gum. He nudged Vanessa. "Look," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly in the crisp air. "Your mother." Vanessa turned. She looked at me. She didn't look at her mom. She looked at a nuisance. She looked at a stain on the scenery. She pulled out her phone, tapping the screen, dismissing my existence with a swipe of her thumb. "Ignore her," Vanessa said. "She's probably begging for booze money. If she comes closer, I'll call security." "I told you, Dorothy," Vincent said, speaking to me but looking through me. "No one loves a failure. You look exactly like what you are, a husk." He turned on his heel, the cashmere coat swirling, and walked toward the warm golden light of the restaurant entrance. Vanessa followed, chuckling at something on her screen. The heavy oak door opened, releasing a burst of laughter and the clinking of silverware, then slammed shut. The silence that followed was heavier than the dumpster lid. I stood there, the wire cutting into my palm. Shame isn't a hot emotion. It's cold. It's absolute zero. It freezes your lungs. I was about to turn back to the trash to salvage the bread because pride doesn't fill a stomach, when a second set of headlights cut the darkness. This car was unassuming, a charcoal sedan, American-made, Government standard. It pulled up right behind the Bentley. A man stepped out. He was older, perhaps 60, dressed in a suit that whispered old money rather than screaming it like Vincent's. He didn't look at the restaurant. He looked at the dumpster. He walked straight toward me. He didn't flinch at the smell. He didn't recoil at the grime on my face. He stopped 3 feet away, respecting a boundary I no longer had. "Mrs. Sullivan?" he asked. I looked around, expecting to see my daughter coming back to mock me. "There's no Mrs. Sullivan here," I rasped. My voice was like gravel in a blender. "Just Dorothy." "Mrs. Dorothy Sullivan," the man corrected, his tone respectful, almost deferential. "My name is Arthur Whitaker. I am an attorney with the firm of Whitaker, Stone, and Lee in New York." "I don't have money for a lawyer," I said, backing away. "If you're here to serve me papers for vagrancy, just give them to me." "I am not here to sue you, ma'am," Whitaker said. "I am here to represent the estate of your sister, Eleanor Sullivan." The name hit me harder than the cold. Eleanor, my older sister, the mathematical genius, the shark. We hadn't spoken since the day I married Vincent. She had told me he was a snake. I had told her to go to hell. She went to New York instead and built a hedge fund that terrified Wall Street. "Eleanor," I whispered, is she looking for me?" Whitaker's expression softened just a fraction. "I'm afraid not, ma'am. Eleanor passed away 3 days ago. Massive coronary." The news didn't bring tears. It brought a hollow ache, the finality of a bridge burning down that I had always assumed I could rebuild someday. "I see," I said. "I'm sorry." "She was very specific in her last requests," Whitaker said. "She knew about your situation. She had been monitoring it." "Monitoring it." "Eleanor Sullivan didn't believe in coincidence," Whitaker said. "She had private investigators watching you for the last 18 months. She knew about the conservatorship. She knew about the divorce. She knew about the dumpster." I felt a flash of anger. She watched me eat garbage and did nothing. "She was waiting," Whitaker said. "She left you her entire estate, Mrs. Sullivan. The penthouse in Manhattan, the liquid assets, the portfolio. After taxes, it is valued at approximately $39 million. The number was a foreign language. 39 million. I looked at my shoes. The sole was flapping loose on the left one. "But," Whitaker continued, and I knew there was a but. "There is a condition." "Of course there is," I spat. "Eleanor never gave anything away for free. What do I have to do? Dance?" "Let's get you out of the cold," Whitaker said, opening the rear door of the sedan. "It is a long story, and it requires a warm room." Whitaker drove me to a Hilton downtown. He didn't check me in. He already had a key card. He walked me to room 412, handed me a duffel bag, and told me he would return in exactly 1 hour. I entered the room. It was standard beige and smelled of lemon polish. To me, it was a palace. I went straight to the bathroom. I stripped off the layers of rags, the coat from the dead woman, the shirt that was stiff with sweat and grime. I turned the shower to scalding. As the hot water hit me, I watched the gray water swirl down the drain. It was like shedding a skin. I scrubbed until my skin was raw and red. I washed my hair 3 times with the hotel shampoo. When I finally stepped out and wiped the steam from the mirror, I stopped. The woman staring back was thin. Her cheekbones were sharp, her eyes sunken in dark sockets. But the grime was gone. The hair was matted, but beneath it, the strength was still there. I saw the ghost of the woman who had built Sullivan Pinnacle Group from a single construction truck. I saw Dorothy Sullivan. I opened the duffel bag Whitaker had left. It contained simple clothes, sweatpants, a clean t-shirt, fresh socks. I put them on. They felt like silk. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands resting on my knees, and waited. At 8 p.m. sharp, there was a knock. Whitaker entered carrying a briefcase and a takeout bag from a steakhouse. He set the food on the desk. "A fillet, mashed potatoes, spinach. Eat," he said. "We can talk while you work." I didn't argue. I ate with a dignity I had to force myself to maintain, fighting the urge to shovel the food in with my hands. Whitaker watched me, his face unreadable. "The condition," I said after the first wave of hunger subsided. "Tell me." Whitaker opened the briefcase. He pulled out a single file folder. "Eleanor left you the money, but she didn't want to give it to a victim," Whitaker said bluntly. "She said, and I quote, 'If Dorothy is still the woman I knew, she won't want charity. She won a weapon.'" He slid a photo across the desk. It was a surveillance shot of Dr. Monroe, the physician who had testified to my incompetence. He was getting into a Porsche 911. "Your sister's investigators found this," Whitaker said. "Dr. Monroe received this car as a gift from a shell company controlled by your daughter. Vanessa, 2 days after the court hearing, my blood ran cold. A bribe, Whitaker confirmed. Eleanor gathered the threads, but she didn't pull them. She left that for you. The condition of the will is this: you have 60 days. You must use the resources of the trust, money, lawyers, investigators, to legally overturn the conservatorship, expose the fraud, and destroy the people who did this to you. You must recover every dime they stole. And if I don't? I asked. If I take the 39 million and retire to an island? You can't, Whitaker said. The money is held in trust. It only releases to you upon the successful completion of this mission. If you fail, or if you refuse to fight, the entire estate is liquidated and donated to a sanctuary for stray cats in Vermont. I stared at him. She's forcing me to go to war. She's giving you a choice, Whitaker corrected. Die as the homeless woman they made you, or live as the woman who took it all back. I looked at the photo of the Porsche. I thought about Vincent's cashmere coat. I thought about Vanessa checking her phone while her mother stood in the garbage. The shame in my chest began to transmute. It hardened. It got hot. I'll do it, I said. Whitaker nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a brass key. Could Eleanor also left you this Unit 27B at the Southside storage facility? She called it the Armory. The next morning, Whitaker drove me to the storage facility. It was a nondescript row of metal units behind a chain-link fence. Unit 27B looked like all the others. Rusty corrugated metal, a heavy padlock hasp. I inserted the key. The lock tumbled smoothly. I hauled the door up. It rattled and groaned, revealing a darkness that smelled not of dust, but of ozone and fresh carpet. I flipped the switch. Fluorescent lights flickered on. It wasn't a storage unit. The walls had been lined with insulation and drywall. The floor was carpeted. In the center sat a massive oak desk, an ergonomic leather chair, and a bank of servers humming in the corner. A whiteboard covered the entire back wall. File cabinets lined the sides. It's a war room, I whispered. Secure internet, encrypted phone line, and the files Eleanor's team compiled. Whitaker said, standing at the entrance. It's your office, Mrs. Sullivan. I walked to the desk. I sat in the chair. For 2 years, I had sat on curbs, on park benches, on plastic crates. The leather embraced me. I placed my hands on the mahogany. I felt a jolt of electricity, a memory of power. I opened the first file on the desk. It was labeled Red Crown Ventures. I began to read. My eyes, which Vincent claimed were failing, scanned the spreadsheets with the precision of a hawk. I saw the pattern immediately. Sullivan Pinnacle Group had sold 3 commercial lots in downtown Chicago to Red Crown Ventures for $6 million. 2 weeks later, Red Crown sold the same lots to a developer for $24 million. They flipped my own land, I said, my voice gaining strength. They sold it to themselves for pennies, then sold it for market value and pocketed the difference. $18 million in profit. Whitaker noted, moved offshore. I grabbed a marker and went to the whiteboard. I drew a box. Sullivan Pinnacle, arrow to Red Crown, arrow to Cayman Islands. It's wire fraud, I said, capping the marker. It's RICO. It's tax evasion. It's a start, Whitaker said, but you need to find where the money landed. We know it went offshore, but the trail goes cold in Zurich. I looked at the file. There was a routing number for a correspondent bank in Switzerland. I can find it, I said. I know how Vanessa thinks. She's greedy, but she's lazy. She wouldn't set up a complex trust. She'd use a nominee. For the next week, I barely slept. I lived in the unit. Whitaker brought me food and fresh clothes. I was obsessed with the Swiss connection. I was convinced that if I could get the beneficiary name on that Swiss account, the war would be over in a day. Dorothy, Whitaker warned me on day 7, you're tunneling. Focus on the doctor. The fraud is the shield. The doctor is the weakness. The money is the smoking gun, I snapped. If I find the money, I don't need the doctor. I used the encrypted laptop to contact a fixer I had known from my days in construction. A woman who specialized in corporate espionage. I wired her $50,000 of the trust's operating funds. She promised me the beneficiary name within 48 hours. The wait was agonizing. I paced the small unit, analyzing the charts, rereading the files. I was confident. I was the CEO again. I was smarter than Vanessa. On day 9, the email came. I clicked it open, my heart hammering. It was a PDF of a bank ledger from the Swiss intermediary. I scrolled to the beneficiary line. Account name, Blue Sky Logistics. Balance, $0. I stared at the screen. 0. It's empty. I whispered. I scrolled down. The account had been opened 3 years ago, before the conservatorship. It had never received a deposit. It was a decoy. It's a honeypot, Whitaker said gently from the doorway. Vanessa set up dummy accounts to catch internal auditors. If anyone queried them, it would trigger an alert. I triggered an alert. I asked, horror dawning on me. Likely, Whitaker said. If Vanessa checks her security logs, she knows someone is looking at blue sky. She knows someone is hunting. I slumped back in the chair. I had wasted 9 days. I had spent $50,000 and I had potentially tipped them off. The arrogance drained out of me, leaving room for the fear to return. I messed up, I said. I thought I was smarter than her. You are, Whitaker said. But you're fighting her game. Stop looking for the money. The money is gone. Go for the man. I need a lawyer, I said the next morning. Not a trust lawyer. I need a killer. Whitaker drove me to a glass tower on Michigan Avenue, the office of Sylvia Bronson. She was a legend in Illinois litigation, a woman who reportedly ate CEOs for breakfast and didn't bother wiping her mouth. We waited in the lobby. I was wearing a new suit Whitaker had bought, but I felt like an imposter. I kept checking my cuffs, expecting to see grime. When the receptionist finally called us back, my palms were sweating. Bronson was standing at the window looking out over the city. She didn't turn when we entered. Mr. Whitaker, she said, her voice sharp and clear, you're asking me to sue the biggest real estate developer in Chicago on behalf of a woman. The state of Illinois has declared legally vegetable. Do you know what my hourly rate is? $3,000, Whitaker said. The trust will pay a double retainer. She turned. She was younger than I expected, perhaps 45, with eyes that were dark, intelligent, and completely devoid of warmth. She looked at me. She looked at the suit. She knew it was new. And this is the client, she said. Dorothy Sullivan, the woman who tried to buy a zoo last year. That was a fabrication, I said, stepping forward. I never tried to buy a zoo. I tried to donate to a wildlife preserve. Tomato, tomato. She waved a hand. The court record says you're senile. Why should I take this case? It's a loser. Even if you were defrauded, you don't have standing to sue. You're a ward of the state. Because I can prove it, I said. Prove what? That you're sane. Any doctor they hire will say you're having a lucid interval. I walked past her. I picked up a dry erase marker from her conference table. I turned to her glass wall. I can prove the RICO case, I said. I began to draw. I didn't look at her. I drew the Red Crown Ventures structure. I cited the dates. I wrote out the statute numbers. 18 U.S. Code Section 1341, mail fraud. 18 U.S. Code Section 1961, racketeering. I detailed the tax evasion strategy involving the capital loss carryover. I filled the glass wall with a complex, perfect diagram of the crime. I capped the marker and turned around. I was breathing hard. Bronson was staring at the wall. She scanned the statutes. She traced the flow of funds with her eyes. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. They used a pass-through entity for the loss carryover. She murmured, "That's sloppy. That's arrogant." She looked at me. "You did this." "I built the company," I said. "I know where the bodies are buried because I bought the shovels," metaphorically. "Vanessa is using my playbook, but she's skipping pages." "Okay," Bronson said. "I'm in. But we have a problem. This," she pointed to the wall, "is great for a criminal trial, but we need to get into court first. We need to break the conservatorship. We need to destroy Dr. Monroe. We need the binders," Bronson said. "The original bank transfer records you have in the storage unit. I need to authenticate them to attach to the subpoena." "I'll get them," I said. I took a cab to the storage facility. It was 9 p.m. The false lead from the Swiss bank was still gnawing at me, but I pushed it aside. I had Bronson. We had a plan. I walked down the row of units. I reached Unit 27B. The door was slightly open. My stomach dropped. I ran the last few steps. The padlock wasn't just unlocked. It was cut. The heavy brass shackle lay on the concrete. I threw the door up. The war room was gone. The desk was overturned. The server rack had been smashed. Wires hanging like gutted entrails. The file cabinets were open. Drawers pulled out and emptied. Papers covered the floor. Shredded, torn, trampled. "No," I whispered. I fell to my knees. I frantically grabbed at the piles of paper. I was looking for the Red Crown binders, the bank authentications, the proof. They were gone. "Vanessa," I said, the name tasting like bile. She knew. The Swiss bank inquiry, the alert. She had sent a cleanup crew. They had stripped everything. My phone rang. It was Whitaker, Dorothy. They hit the unit, I said, my voice shaking. They took the files. Whitaker, they took the proof. We have nothing. There was a long silence on the line. Are you safe? Whitaker asked. Yes. They're gone. Get out of there, Whitaker commanded. Go to Brunson's office now. I sat in Brunson's conference room an hour later, covered in dust from the unit floor. I told her everything. Bronson didn't yell. She didn't panic. She sat very still, tapping a pen on the mahogany table. We lost the paper trail, she said. Without those certified records, it's your word against theirs, and legally, your word is worthless. So it's over, I said, putting my head in my hands. I failed. No, Bronson said. Her voice was low and dangerous. It just means we can't win with documents anymore. We have to win with blood. We need a confession. We need Dr. Monroe to say the words out loud on tape. He'll never talk to me, I said. Not to you, Bronson said. To her. She pressed a button on her intercom. Send in Delilah. Delilah didn't look like a private investigator. She looked like money. She was in her late 30s, blonde, dressed in a Chanel suit that screamed trust fund. She walked into the conference room with a confidence that rivaled Bronson's. This is Delilah, Bronson said. She's going to be Dr. Monroe's new favorite patient. The plan was simple, high risk, and our only shot. Delilah would pose as the niece of a wealthy, aging oil tycoon who was losing his grip. She would present herself as a concerned family member looking for a specific kind of help. We spent 2 days prepping her. I fed her lines from my own life, the things Vincent had said about me, the accusations Vanessa had made. We built a profile of a victim that Monroe would recognize. A golden goose he could pluck. We parked the surveillance van 2 blocks from Dr. Monroe's clinic on State Street. It was cramped, smelling of coffee and nervous sweat. I watched the monitors. Delilah was wearing a button camera on her blouse. She's in, the text said dot on the screen. Dr. Monroe's office appeared. It was plush, filled with expensive art, bought with my money, no doubt. Monroe sat behind his desk. He looked tired, greasy. The Porsche hadn't bought him happiness. It had just bought him higher maintenance costs. Doctor, Delilah said, her voice trembling perfectly. I don't know what to do. Uncle Jerry, he's trying to give away the ranch. He wants to donate $10 million to a cat shelter. I winced. The cat shelter reference was a dark joke from Whitaker. Monroe leaned forward. That is concerning behavior. Erratic financial decisions are a classic sign of cognitive decline. That's just it, Delilah said. We need to stop him for his own good. But our lawyer says we need a medical evaluation. But Jerry, on his good days, he seems so normal. We're afraid a doctor might miss the signs. Monroe nodded. He knew this dance. Cognitive deficits can be intermittent. It requires a trained eye to see the subtle patterns. We need a doctor who understands the big picture, Delilah said. She reached into her purse. She pulled out a thick white envelope. She placed it on the desk. My family is very grateful to those who help us protect Uncle Jerry. On the monitor, I watched Monroe's eyes. They flicked to the envelope, then to the door, then back to the envelope. The dossier Whitaker had compiled showed Monroe was $200,000 in debt to a bookie in Vegas. He was drowning. He reached out. He put his hand on the envelope. He slid it into his top drawer. I can help you, Monroe said. His voice changed. It lost the medical affectation and became conspiratorial. I can schedule an evaluation. I can ensure the report reflects the family's concerns. But the tests, Delilah pressed. What if he passes them? The tests are subjective, Monroe said, leaning back. Arrogant now. It's all about interpretation. If he hesitates, I mark it as confusion. If he gets angry, I mark it as emotional volatility. I can ask questions in a way that ensures he fails. It's a narrative, my dear. I write the story, and the judge reads it. Just like you did for the Sullivan family, Delilah asked, improvising. Monroe smiled, a greasy, self-satisfied smile. Let's just say Vanessa Sullivan is a very satisfied client. The mother, Dorothy. She was sharper than your uncle, but I painted her as a vegetable. It's effortless. Got him, Bronson whispered in the van. Cut the feed. 2 days later, Dr. Monroe sat in Bronson's conference room. He looked annoyed. He thought this was a routine annoyance regarding some billing dispute. He had his lawyer with him, a bored-looking man named Stan. I sat at the far end of the table, silent. Monroe glanced at me with a sneer. He didn't see a threat. He saw a defeated old woman. Let's make this quick, Monroe said. I have patience. This is a deposition in the matter of Sullivan versus Sullivan, Bronson said. Raise your right hand. The court reporter swore him in. Dr. Monroe, Bronson began, did you diagnose Dorothy Sullivan with dementia? I did, Monroe said, early onset Alzheimer's with paranoid delusions. And was this diagnosis based on objective medical evidence? Absolutely, Monroe lied smoothly. MRI scans, cognitive batteries, clinical observation. Did you receive any compensation for this diagnosis outside of standard insurance billing? Monroe didn't blink. Of course not. That would be unethical. Bronson paused. She looked at me. I gave a small nod. Dr. Monroe, Bronson said, I'm going to go off the record for a moment. She signaled the reporter to stop typing. She picked up an iPad from the table. She slid it across the mahogany surface. It stopped inches from Monroe's hand. Press play, she said. Monroe frowned. He tapped the screen. The video played. High-definition audio filled the room. I can ask questions in a way that ensures he fails. I painted her as a vegetable. It's effortless. Monroe froze. His face went gray. It wasn't a gradual change. It was instant. The blood simply evacuated his head. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His lawyer, Stan, leaned in. He watched 5 seconds of the video. Then he closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. He knew it was over. That's Monroe stammered. That's out of context. It's a confession to insurance fraud, medical malpractice, and perjury, Bronson said calmly. And since you accepted the cash, which was marked bills, by the way, it's also a federal crime. She leaned forward. Now, doctor, we can send this to the medical board and the FBI within the hour, or you can go back on the record right now and tell us exactly what Vanessa Sullivan gave you for that diagnosis. Monroe looked at his lawyer. Stan didn't even look back. He just nodded. Surrender. Monroe slumped. He looked small. She gave me a car, he whispered, and $50,000 in cash. On the record, Bronson commanded. We scheduled the meeting for Friday. We called it a settlement conference. Vincent and Vanessa arrived at Bronson's office, thinking they were coming to negotiate a small allowance for me to keep me quiet. I arrived 10 minutes early. I was wearing a navy pinstripe suit tailored in Milan, one of the first purchases I made once the trust unlocked the operational funds. I was clean-shaven. My hair was trimmed. I stood at the head of the conference table looking out at the Chicago skyline. The door opened. So Vanessa's voice boomed. How much does the old woman want? She stopped. She saw me. She saw the suit. She saw the posture. She didn't see the beggar from the alley. She saw the CEO. Vincent walked in behind her. He froze. His eyes darted from my face to the expensive leather briefcase on the table. Dorothy, he whispered. Sit down, I said. My voice was steady, deep, and resonant. It wasn't a request. They sat. Their lawyer, a man named Bennett, who I had hired 10 years ago, looked nervous. He sensed the shift in atmospheric pressure. We are here to discuss a stipend, Bennett started. Trying to regain control. My clients are willing to offer $2,000 a month if Mrs. Sullivan agrees to. There is no stipend, Bronson interrupted. She slid a document across the table. This is a copy of the motion filed this morning. The conservatorship has been vacated. That's impossible, Vanessa said, laughing nervously. You can't just, Dr. Monroe confessed. I said. I looked Vanessa dead in the eye. We have him on video. We have the wire transfer for the Porsche. We have everything, Vanessa. Vanessa's face went pale. Dad, she's bluffing. We also have this, Bronson said. She dropped a thick binder on the table. The RICO lawsuit, Red Crown Ventures. The air left the room. Vincent gasped. He knew the name. Wire fraud, Bronson listed. Money laundering, conspiracy. Marcus Meissen, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, suddenly made a sound, a whimper. Mom, Marcus said. You said it was legal. You said it was tax planning. Shut up, Marcus, Vincent hissed. No. Marcus stood up. He was shaking. I signed those papers you made me sign as the treasurer. I'm not going to jail for you. Sit down, Vanessa shouted. I looked at my son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the man who had stood in court and wept about my dementia. Marcus, I said gently. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. Mama, I didn't know. They told me you were sick. They told me we had to protect the money. You told the judge I forgot your son's name. I said. You said I called him Jason. Marcus froze. He wiped his nose. I had to. What is his name? Marcus, I asked. He blinked. He looked confused. The panic had scrambled his brain. He looked at Vincent for the answer. His name is, it's Jason, isn't it? He stammered. I shook my head. The sadness was a physical weight. No, sweetheart, his name is Lucas. You lied so many times you forgot the truth. Marcus wailed. It was a broken, ugly sound. He collapsed into his chair, sobbing into his hands. Vincent looked at his son with disgust. Then he looked at me. The mask fell away. There was no more pretense of family. There was only hate. Fine, Vincent spat. You win. You broke the conservatorship. You want the company back. Take it. He laughed. A harsh, barking laugh. It's empty, Doris. We gutted it. We leveraged every building. We took out 50 million in loans and moved the cash offshore. And we spent it. The company is a shell. It's bankrupt. If you take it back, you're just taking back a mountain of debt. He stood up, leaning over the table, his eyes wild. You're ruined, Dorothy. You think you won. You're just the captain of a sinking ship. We spent it all. The room was silent. Vincent was breathing hard, triumphant in his scorched earth victory. Vanessa was smirking again. Then Whitaker stood up. He had been sitting in the back, silent as a shadow. He walked to the table. He placed his briefcase on it. Mr. Sullivan, Whitaker said politely, you are correct. The company is carrying 50 million in debt. See, Vincent said, even her lawyer knows. However, Whitaker continued, you are mistaken about who holds that debt. He opened the briefcase. He pulled out a stack of loan agreements. When the trust identified the distressed state of Sullivan Pinnacle Group, we didn't just sit by. The estate of Eleanor Sullivan purchased the debt. We bought the notes from Bank of America, from Wells Fargo, from the private equity lenders. Vincent stopped smiling. What? We are the bank, Whitaker said. The trust owns the debt on the company. And he pulled out more papers. We also bought the mortgage on your house, Vincent, and the loan on your Bentley, and Vanessa's line of credit. Vanessa stood up. You can't do that. It's a free market, Whitaker said. And here is the unfortunate part. All of these loan agreements have a bad boy clause. It states that if the borrower commits an act of fraud, the lender has the right to accelerate the debt. Whitaker looked at them. His face was mild, but his eyes were hard as flint. Since we have evidence of federal wire fraud, we are calling the loans, all of them. Meaning, Vincent whispered. Meaning you owe the trust 50 million, Whitaker said. Payable today. We don't have it, Vanessa stammered. It's tied up. Then we begin foreclosure proceedings immediately, Whitaker said. We are taking the house, the cars. The offshore accounts will be frozen by the FBI by noon. You are leaving this room with nothing. Vincent sank back into his chair. He looked at me. For the first time, I saw fear, real, primal fear. Dorothy, he pleaded, you can't let them do this. I'm your husband, ex-husband, I said. We have nowhere to go, he said. Dorothy, please. I looked at him. I looked at Vanessa. I looked at Marcus. The dumpsters behind Rosewood Grill have fresh bread on Tuesdays, I said. If you get there before the raccoons. It took 3 hours to sign the papers. They signed over everything, the stock, the deeds, the keys. They left the office in silence, stripped of their arrogance, 3 ghosts walking out into a world they were ill-equipped to survive. I sat in the office alone with Whitaker. It's done, I said. Day 58. Congratulations, Mrs. Sullivan, Whitaker said. You met the condition. I passed the test, I corrected. Whitaker paused. He closed his briefcase. It wasn't a test, Dorothy, he said softly. What do you mean? Eleanor didn't set the 60-day limit to test your competence, Whitaker said. She knew you could win. She was a math genius. She calculated the odds. She knew you would destroy them. Then why the threat of the cat shelter? Because she knew your heart, Whitaker said. She knew that if she just gave you the money, you would have hesitated. If Vincent had come to you crying, or Marcus had begged, you might have forgiven them. You might have given them a second chance. I stared at him. The condition wasn't a test, Whitaker said. It was a quarantine. She forced you to fight them for 60 days so you wouldn't save them. She forced you to sever the limbs so you could survive. I looked out the window. I thought about the cold in the alley. I thought about the fire in the war room. Eleanor was right, I whispered. If I had the money on day 1, I would have bailed them out. I would have been the victim again. She saved me from myself. 6 months later, I am standing on the balcony of the penthouse in Manhattan. The air is crisp, but I am warm. I am wearing a cashmere sweater. I have a cup of coffee in my hand. The Sullivan Pinnacle Group is rebuilding. I purged the rot, sold the bad assets, and we are profitable again. I am the CEO. I am 70 years old, and I have never been sharper. My assistant walks onto the balcony. Mrs. Sullivan, a letter came for you. Her soul, she hands me a cheap envelope. The handwriting is Marcus's. I open it. Mama, I'm so sorry. We're living in a motel in Jersey. Dad is drinking. Vanessa ran off. I'm working at a diner. Please, Mama, I have nothing, just a little help. I love you, Marcus. I read it twice. I feel the tug in my chest, the old instinct, the mother's guilt. But then I remember the courtroom. I remember Lucas. I remember the alley. I walk back into the office. I walk to the heavy-duty shredder in the corner. I feed the letter into the slot. The machine whirs, slicing the plea into confetti. I don't feel happy, but I don't feel sad either. I feel clean. I learned that dignity has a price. Sometimes that price is everything you used to love. But looking at the city below, knowing I am standing on my own 2 feet, I know it was a bargain. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.